Hello, this is Infrastructure Lead Shankar Chandran here. I'm here to share with you about a strategic leadership model, especially focused on infrastructure, and how important it is for a leader to have a way, to execute a strategy and execute I would say a right strategy to be successfully setting up an operations, right? In this case, we're talking about setting up a global operations, right? We have a global operations which is very diverse in nature, and we're talking about applying a infrastructure leadership strategy in trying to execute things, right? So the first thing that we're talking about is, yes, we have something to decide. The first thing that comes into play is about choosing a strategic location, right? Now, what are those few things that you would consider before you would decide on which location would strategically align towards being successful on this infrastructure business? Number one, right, we're talking about people, right, and low-cost people with effective skill sets supported by an effective education system, so that you don't run out of skill set just about 1 year for you to be successful in this business. We're talking about scalability and long-term success. And then we're talking about availability of effectively supported training institutions and education institutions, and then competitiveness in the availability of resource support. Right? If you don't talk about competitiveness, then we're talking about just about trying to bring in new set of people, and then we're just trying to effectively look about how we're going to improve on it. No, we need to talk about how we're going to bring a strong people at the later stages. When I will go back to the next slide. So once you choose about how we're going to strategically, you've decided on the location based on this, the various factors I was talking about, not to forget, your focus should be on the low-cost delivery. Then we're talking about how well you manage those skills. Just to give you right in terms of what these skill management is all about, is these kinds of competence levels that you're working on. These are the kind of competencies you're trying to set up here. So you need to relate these competence and the availability of skills in the location that you're choosing for you to be successful as a leader. So I'll give you a little glimpse about each of these topics, each of these skills, so that you know, as a leader, what kind of people you're looking at. From the end-user services standpoint, this is the first kind of window. We're talking about people who are supporting customer service centers, and they're talking about distribution client support. In simple man's language, we're talking about business processing outsourcing or call center people. So the skill set we're really talking about here is English, good conversation and written language, and then some level of technological skills to actually support them remotely from the distribution client support standpoint. And then we're talking about network services vertical, where we're talking about supporting voice and conferencing, which is the audio systems we're talking about, and then the infrastructure, which includes both office, what is inside the office aligned, and also talking about outside the office, interconnecting various offices or globally. And then we're talking about large mainframe-based systems, how we're going to support them from the network standpoint, and then telecom, what to purchase, how to manage, what are the technologies that's going to come in, and what we're going to migrate. And then we're talking about trying to protect your infrastructure by having right policies or adhering to the corporate guideline, and how the kind of skills that is required to to implement that and defend your infrastructure. And then we're talking about various kinds of processes and tools that you're going to allow you to manage this kind of a vertical. And then we're talking about security services, which starts with managing your protecting your email servers, and then you're talking about infrastructure protection, identity access, where we're talking about not only protecting your emails or spams, and we're also talking about right user getting the right access, right? One wrong user gets the access, then he's probably going to misuse the whole system. Then we're talking about compliance posture. This is about how well you adhere these infrastructure policies to the corporate guideline, and then being audited, right? And not to forget about all the capital investment you're making on assets, right? How well are you going to manage this and govern this in a well-controlled environment? It's called about asset management, right? Then we're talking about server systems operations, where we're talking about the servers, And then you're talking about hosting environment where we have managed hosting, or you're talking about cloud services. That's the kind of new technology that you're hearing in the market. And then you're talking about data management, how well you protect your data in the servers, and then how well you scale up the data in the servers, and then your server management. This is pretty much talking about how well you execute things to keep your server running for long. Right, then you're talking about how well you scale up and manage your storages. And then pretty much on the management infrastructure, we're talking about managing one or more cumulative of these components. And then the operational, which is the process part of the whole system. How well you seamlessly run the operations, irrespective of how many people are actually going to receive this follow ticket, right? And then we're talking about service management, which is talking about keeping your internal pure processes seamless from the external point of view, right? So when customer is going to talk to you, you're going to talk to him probably at a very high level within the contractual framework. And then we're talking about process adherence like problem and change management, how well you run the governance board to bind these processes together. And not to forget how well you track this service request from the client's commitment standpoint. Right, whether are all these requests complying by the so-called the contractual framework, or there's a deviation. And not to forget about the transition and transformation, which is the last piece, where we're talking about how well we're going to move the services being done by one set group of people to another group of people seamlessly. And then having done that, how well you scale it up so that you are in the world map with updated technologies, you're scaling it up. So having this kind of broad spectrum of knowledge in the infrastructure space, we're talking about a wide group of people skills that you need to do analysis before you make a strategic decision about which location you're going to put. And then not to forget, having done all this and having after successfully hiring a lot of people, we're going to have a system in place to manage them successfully so that we end up having those people for a long time and then be successful in our decision that we have made. I will go to the next slide later on to explain to you how well we can manage things and how well we can be successful in supporting the strategy. Having done this, we're talking about growing up our people, right? How well we scale up, which is the key for our strategic model. Because if you don't have a plan for your people are going to leave us, right? And we leaders are going to come back and keep redesigning or rethinking our strategic model. That's not the right approach. We're talking about making a decision and having the supporting processes to be successful, and we're talking about scalability. We should look at nexus scalability and not to come back and fix the issues. So let's take this model. We're talking about how well we're going to groom our people so that we retain them and we scale up. In all consideration, we're talking about 4 stages of people, where we're talking about at the basic level, we're talking about analysts. These are the kind of entry-level people who comes with little knowledge, right? They know, if you train them, they know how to do it, but they're not specialized, right? So then we'll have to move them to the next stage, which is a specialist group. These are people who have specialized knowledge in specific product lines, right? It could be data services, firewalls, whatever, relating to the service portfolios I was referring in the previous slide. And then we're talking about experts who have specialized in more than 1 or 2 areas, where they're talking about expert kind of an advisory functions related to 2 or more product lines. And finally, the consultant level, we're talking about the highest level of expertise that we have got, whom you can approach if you're sitting across making a supporting decision in terms of what we're going to do next for this account. So we have a ladder to climb, right? So you have to take a first step, second step, 3 steps. So in order for us to have this 4-step model that we're talking about, we need to have a game plan. We need to have a reciprocated program supported by various other modules. So we are representing here a map, a globe, right? Just like how the brain's connected, and we're trying to connect the different components of our supporting programs and make it look like a large program to be successful in how we're going to allow people to climb up this ladder. The first thing we're talking about is people, right? We need people for you to be successful in this program. Now, for you to be successful in this program, for these people to look up what these three ladders are, you need to have a defined, crisp plan based on various service line competence that we spoke about previously. You need to be very clear to them that what they need to do to get to the next step. Right? That's the plan that you need to have. And if that plan is supported by mentor program, fantastic. Right? So that's the first thing that you need to have. And then the training investment that you need to make. You can either have internal trainers or you can have external trainers, because these are product specific trainings that one has to get for us to scale up from analyst to specialist. And that would be the first two things that you need to have for allowing us or scaling up a person to move from analyst to specialist stage. So a person has successfully climbed this first step. But now he's talking about climbing the next step, where we're talking about two things. Number one, we're talking about training investment we have made, and then we're talking about Training Central. Training Central is a global repository, right? It's not just about technological trainings, but it is also about all the tough issues that people have faced in the real world and how this was addressed. So this is like a kind of a repository in this ITIL language. We call it as database, or we call it as knowledge base system, right? We need to have that globally, because every geography has different kinds of expertise, and it's important that we have flexibility to allow this knowledge to get together. And these are the two key things that we're going to have. One thing you have to always be flexible about is to also permit some level of staffing to come from outside, so that you get new fresh thought process that comes in here. It could be small, but that's fine. You need to bring in some level of external expertise to bring a new dimensional thought process for you to spread your organization and scale your organization. And then finally, we're talking about once a person climbs up the ladder to the final consultant, that's the biggest breadth that we need to do in terms of two things. Number one, how are we going to retain them, right? We need to have a very strong retention plan, because we have spent quite a few amount of programs, quite a few of our steps of efforts that we've taken, and it's quite a few years. It's just not going to happen in a few months. It's quite a few years. And then finally, having these people with retention plan, how are we going to scale up this organization, or how are we going to bring the benefit to the organization? And that can happen only in the innovation pipeline. That's the key here, because the most successful organizations have a very strong innovation pipeline, and that's the success story. So you climb up 4 steps for you to get innovation funding, right? So we're moving to the summary part of it, just to give you a glimpse of it. We started with a strategic decision that we made based on the skill set we've got, and then we talk about having a program in place to support the people to scale up. In the virtue of it, basically you made a strategic decision in finding a location which is appropriate for your decision in supporting your infrastructure, and then successfully managed your people and retained the people, and took the direction of being very successful and scalable. Now, this is a short video from based on my experience. And if you have any questions, please get back to me. Thank you very much.